So today our topic is metabolism, and yeah, I know I haven't talked about protein yet. We will next week. Part of the reason I skipped to metabolism is because I promised last week we would do a different 7-day this week. It's still the same, but so if you happen to look in the folder, so it was when Stephen turned in his notes, he had a big thing in the middle of the notes. This is your reminder. So metabolism has to do with it. So I'll be getting into that in here, however far I get. And then for the rest of you, is there any questions about the presentations and stuff? I'm going to keep pushing the wrong thing for my next slide. It was a question Raul asked me at the beginning. You're not going to be able to cover everything in the presentation, but enough that you're up here presenting, being conversational, having fun and stuff. There is a dark side. If you're able to put, like Stephen was able to have a slide to mention the dark side. Pineapple, that 18 months and the fertilizer they use, once they harvest it, they can't use the land for, it's like usable for like 5-6 years, and then you can't use that land again for, it was like 20 or 50 years.
Oh, wow.
And also the fertilizer they use has been linked to, it ends up in cow's milk and Parkinson's disease, and people grew up like in areas where pineapple, look into that for your paper. Anyway, when I went to Costa Rica, that's when I stopped eating pineapple, because they took us to a pineapple farm and then they told us how awful it is for everything. So finding the dark side, there is a dark side to everything. And then also a reminder, you want to have 2 studies. Neither of them talked about their studies, but again, it's a time limit. Make sure if you have the time to talk about one of your studies in the thing, it can be it depends on your background. It can go into psychology. It can just be like a people diet study or something like how many people like pineapple. Anyway, have fun with it. Make it your own. Like we could all do the topic pineapple and I would get 14 different papers. And then Anna, just make sure we talk before you leave on your topic. Okay. All right, so metabolism, when you hear the word metabolism, I'm a biochemist, so I think of it as metabolism. We think of it, the food we eat has to get changed into energy so that we're moving around and stuff like that. And so that's what we're looking at. It also has to do, metabolism does happen 24/7. So even when you're sleeping, your body, it's going to slow down, of course, right? Because you're sleeping, or when you're at rest, your guys' metabolism's a little bit lower than mine is right now. Theirs is both calming down, because being up here and doing a presentation, all the time, it's going. And then, of course, if you go, this is actually at above 5,000 meters. This is the highest place I've ever been. It's like 5,500, which is like 17 or 18,000 feet. So above anything in the continental US. Anyway, your body metabolism is very different when you get to high elevations, but it is still, it's the same and different. And then this is from 4 years ago when the Blazers were in the finals, or not the finals, but I think they made it to the semifinals. I understand this year they didn't even come close to the playoffs and stuff. But still, when you're exercising and stuff, your metabolic rate increases. And of course, if you can jump with joy and playfulness. And so myself as a biochemist, this is why when I go to a doctor and they say, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a biochemist. I mean, I just say it now for the fun of it, because they all go, oh, Krebs Cycle. It's funny, this naturopath, I take my friend to, it's right across the street. And that even came up the other day. They like will bring me handouts. Oh, we got this on how the pathway of this works now for you. And then they start talking about the Krebs Cycle, which is in here. I'll mention it. I can't even, where is it? I guess this is the Krebs Cycle. Yeah, this is the Krebs Cycle. But anyway, this is the sum of like all the metabolic pathways going on in your cells. And this is not meant to make you overwhelmed. It's to make you go, wow, my cell, every cell in your body, pretty amazing, except your red blood cells, because their purpose is transporting, so they have to do something a little bit different. And so the sum really can be broken down into two things. One is we eat big molecules. So starch, we're supposed to eat big molecules, starch, protein, fats. And so they come as big molecules, and catabolism breaks them down into small molecules. So glucose, amino acids, fatty acids. And those then get into our cells, and we make them into energy, and then we can do stuff. This term is that our cells will also store for later use. So some of these small molecules will get stored, and that's actually the liver's big job, is it sorts through everything. And so it's actually really awesome. I didn't even realize that until you started talking, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the liver today and how important it is. And so that's like a really simplistic way of breaking down everything into catabolism and anabolism. We're going to just look at the breakdown pathway. And I actually will have my mouse. I have it with me. It's just a time thing. On Wednesday, so you can actually stand over here while you're doing it. But if most students like to stand here and kind of hide behind the thing. If you're able to put it on a USB, that's going to be the easiest. If you're like Amber and need to bring your laptop, hopefully that's going to work. You saw on mine, it didn't. And so I don't know if it's like the first one and then the second one, we suddenly run into an issue. The other thing to realize, this is going to be behind you. Although I just realized this doesn't happen in my other classes. There's a perfect reflection of the screen there. It's like when you go to church and the people can see the song they're singing because it's in the back of the church. So that will also be on your screen here. So as you're talking and stuff, but you can, this is different from my other classroom. You can kind of hide over here, although it is best to be out in front. And something I pointed out for both of them, but I pointed out when Amber was talking, was she had bulleted lists. So you don't want that wall of words. People see things sometimes and they're going to be overwhelmed. You can have fun with it too. You can make a quiz out of it. You can make a game. I've had people do game shows. Sorry, let's see. So when I talk about energy, I'm pretty sure everybody's heard ATP. It's capital letters because it stands for adenosine triphosphate. So, and I have a picture of it in the next slide. So our food is broken down, and when our food breaks down, it's the electrons in our food. That's why you can eat crap and still stay alive. You don't feel good, but it's why we've been able to keep eating crap, because it's the electrons in the food that is needed for the ATP. And then when, so that's making the ATP. And then all the processes we do in life, which is whether it's walking our muscles, thinking with our muscle up here, transporting nutrients around our body, that's where the ATP is going to be used. And so that's why we're making it. It's not just about our muscles. And so there's a picture of it. Because again, I'm a chemist. I don't know how you can talk about ATP without seeing it. And even though you may not have a lot of chemistry, the P stands for P on the periodic table, or phosphate. So the P surrounded by the oxygens. And it's these bonds that are just perfect. They're storing. So chemical bonds are little batteries, itty bitty batteries. They store energy. And so that bond is storing like 7.4 kilocalories of energy. Each one, it's the Goldilocks number. It's like having a $20 bill. So if all you carried around were pennies, that'd be pretty useless, right? And the people, when you went to like Dutch Bros and gave them a whole bag of pennies, they would just look at you and say, no. They give you bags of pennies and you don't say, no. And it's also if somebody gives you $1,000 bill. You also are like, no, no, can't take $1,000 bill. Even 100, you're probably like, really? Yeah. But and so this is just the perfect amount. I mean, you like 5s, but a 20 is perfect too, because a 20 we're getting a good amount, or a 10. So it's just the right. It's not too little where we have to have a lot of ATP around like pennies, and it's not too big. We don't want a huge amount of energy to come out of the bond. because it would take too much to rebuild it. So it's just got the right amount. And actually both of these have it. And so there's some processes in your body where it actually cuts both of them, but usually it's just one of these come off. And so it's called a triphosphate ATP. And so when one comes off, it's a diphosphate, and when two come off. By the way, more from this, because you probably all heard of DNA, and then there's RNA. And so RNA means ribose. And so our body is really thrifty. So this is this part with only one phosphate. So the AMP is actually also used to build RNA molecules. And then if you take the oxygen off there, it becomes deoxyribonucleic acid. And then adenosine, just this part without the phosphate, is a neurotransmitter, and it's the one that caffeine blocks. So adenosine is the one that makes you feel like you're sleepy. I must have a lot of adenosine because I'm pretty sure I have narcolepsy because I fall asleep no matter where I am. Like, people are like, how's your sleep? And I'm like, that's the problem. I sleep really well. Anyway, and so caffeine blocks. Caffeine actually, is somebody doing coffee or caffeine? I don't want to ruin the show and stuff. Anyway, caffeine looks a lot like this, and it binds to the receptor for adenosine and it blocks it. And so adenosine can't bind, so you don't feel sleepy. And so that's why it makes people alert. It also makes people jittery and other things like that. Yeah, so ATP is a battery. And so, sorry, when it's lost one of the phosphates, it's lost its charge. And so we just have to charge it back up, and it's the electrons from your food. All right. This is just a quick note, and I left this slide in there because it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Everybody's all about ATP. There's actually a UTP, a GTP, and a CTP. They're all triphosphates, and they each have a specific place they're used. And everybody's all about ATP because ATP is the one that moves your muscles. And we're really obsessed about our muscles in the society. But we have to make RNA. We have to make lipids because that's storing. We have to make proteins. And so other ones are used. They each have a niche use. This is me. Eventually, I'm like, we can get really overconsumed with all the details and all the molecules. And hey, this is a tubule, and this is how it gets it going. And I think that's one of the things that science is going way down this micro, and we're losing the overall big picture, which is you have to eat real food. Like, you would not believe how many students tell me stories. And it's really that simple. It was a question, I can't remember now who asked me. It was something about olive oil. I think multiple people have asked me, and I heard a talk this weekend. I wasn't expecting it. And she said, you know, rather than eating olive oil, Mother Nature made it the full olive. And so, or rather than coconut oil, the full coconut and stuff. And she said, coconut milk, it's really good for you, coconut water, but you have to make your own. She was in India. Like, I one time bought a coconut, and then it sat in my garage for 3 months because I could not figure out how to crack it. Somebody finally cracked it for me. So, all right. The background is me being funny. That is the mitochondria. And you did all learn about a mitochondria and stuff. I figured I couldn't talk about this. We're going to talk about digestion in a minute because we have to get to that. But in metabolism, we digest our food. It gets into this, it has to get then into your body, right? And then it has to get into the cells. So all the cells in your body. And most people now are obsessed about this piece in the middle, which is called the nucleus, because that's where the DNA is. But there's all this other stuff that's amazing. And the whole thing is surrounded by this membrane. That's amazing. But these little guys here on this picture, it's kind of green. They're mitochondria. And if you learn this like in middle school or high school, it's always called the powerhouse, because that's where like 95% of the ATP in our body is made, is in the mitochondria. And it's completely dependent on oxygen. And that oxygen is the oxygen you breathe. So we're going to walk through, there's 4 steps. What else do I have about mitochondria? Yeah, that's another picture. This is actually one of my favorite pictures I've seen because it makes it actually look like a cradle. So they cut it in half. The mitochondria actually has 2 membranes. That's how important it is. It has its own DNA. Your mitochondria all came from your mom, by the way. So your cell came from your mom, right? Because that was the ovum, and your got fertilized. So half of your DNA is mom's and half is dad's, but everything else about the cell is from your mom. So actually, like 52% of your DNA is from mom because your mitochondria all came from your mom. So on that hike at 5,500 meters, the whole time, all I kept thinking is, poor Joey got stuck with my mitochondria. Because your mitochondria are all how efficiently you're using oxygen, and I sure as heck don't. And there's Pimba, right, the Sherpa, and he's walking around like there's nothing. Somebody should really study the Sherpa's mitochondria because it must be something different. Because they like do better at high oxygen where there's, at high altitude where there's less oxygen. Anyway, that's just kind of a cool, beautiful picture of how it shows mitochondria. And that's the powerhouse of our cell. And so like over 95% of it is of your ATP, which is going to power your muscles, is made in the mitochondria. So RBC is for red blood cells, and your red blood cells, I'm pretty sure you all know what they do. They carry the oxygen around to all the other cells in your body. So what needs the oxygen is the mitochondria. So if your red blood cells had a mitochondria, it'd be like giving me the tray of like healthy brownies and saying, bring it. I do bring them to the class when I make them. But basically the red blood cell would keep the oxygen for itself. So red blood cells, when they're fully developed, they actually lose their mitochondria so that they don't need oxygen, and they very pleasantly deliver the oxygen to everything. And people make lots of fun stuff. So this is the 4 steps that we go through for metabolism. We're going to focus mostly on the first step, which is digestion, and we're going to start there. And so digestion is where we take the big molecules, which is fats and proteins, and carbs. It means starches, the long chains, like these are complex carbs. So we're supposed to be eating real food. You're getting that. And what happens in digestion, in our digestive tract, is we break them down into single units, not atoms yet, but into amino acids, into glucose, into fatty acids. And then they get absorbed into the cells. And then the second stage happens in the cell somewhere. These guys become what's called an acetyl group, which is 2 carbons. So everything's made up of carbons. Glucose has 6 carbons, fatty acids have like 16 to 20 some. And so there's a process that breaks everything down into 2 carbons, the same 2 carbon group. And that is done, why? The last 2 stages, there's no longer 3 different pathways or even 4 different pathways. Everything now funnels into the last 2 steps. And this is when you're suddenly funneled into the mitochondria. And so everything gets broken down into 2 carbons, and we funnel it into the mitochondria. And the mitochondria goes through what's called the Krebs cycle, and then the ETC or electron transport chain, and we get ATPs out. And so it makes it much more efficient, right? Because we only have to do one process. We don't have everybody doing something different, and nobody knows what's going on. And so our body is geared, all the cells, to get it to there, and then this is all going on in the mitochondria. The other thing that's interesting, and I want to point out, at this point, everything's broken down to 2 carbons. If you have more 2 carbons than your body needs, your liver goes, well, I can only use so much, and it stores it. It doesn't go back to what you came from. If you're doing all those protein shakes things that everybody's like obsessed with, and now everybody's having strokes at 30, and I'm pretty sure they're going to find out it's from that. it gets broken down to 2 carbons, and your body goes, I didn't need that. And it stores it as fat. And that's the fat that's all around the liver. And just go to the store and look at people and with compassion. And so all those extra calories. It's also all the fast calories. So it's how fast things are being digested. So when we remove fiber, when we remove fats, because fats slow down. I'm not saying to go and do fat bombs and stuff. The keto thing is quite fascinating to me. The first time I saw one of those in the store, I was like, are you serious? Like, I get that when we went on the low fat thing, that was wrong. But now that we're like going the other way and making people believe if you just eat pure fat, you're going to be fine.
They make fat bombs in the store?
You can have them. Yeah, they're at every store now.
Oh.
You haven't noticed them? Oh, it's just hysterical. And they're all highly processed food. It's like a keto fat bomb.
All over erythritol, stuff like that.
What's a fat bomb? It's I guess it's fat. It's highly processed fat. It's probably like safflower corn flour. It probably doesn't even know what oil and fat they have in there.
That's what keto people eat for dessert.
Oh.
They're usually all made out of cream cheese and maybe berries. Maybe.
They can't be cream cheese because they're not in the cold food area. They're out like with the processed, they're out in the processed food area. They're highly processed, high fat, low sugar because they're going to have all the fake sugars in them. I mean, they're not, or they, it's fascinating. But if there's no fiber, if you're eating real food, Mother Nature packaged stuff, so it's going to be released slowly, and so you're not going to overwhelm the system. If you're eating from packages, you overwhelm the system. It's getting digested too fast. So when they add fiber to stuff, it doesn't work the same way because the fiber and sugar aren't bound together. So you're eating food and it's getting to here too fast, and your body can only make so much go through these 2 paths. And so here it's going to go off and store it as fat. And so when they named it fast food, they didn't realize how appropriately they named it fast food. I don't know if that helps. All right, so that's a biochemist viewpoint that it's really can be broken into these 4 stages. And again, these last 2 we probably won't get to, but the point of this is once we get into the mitochondria, it funnels in and we're making ATP. The whole point of eating, what you want from that, the only thing that gets there is the electrons. So if you remember your chemistry, the electrons, right? So it doesn't matter what food you're eating, the electrons, some of them will eventually get here, and that's going to make the ATP. It's the energy that turns the turbine to make the ATP, for those of you who've had some of this. So we're going to look at step 1 today. Maybe we'll get a little bit further. So your digestive tract, some people talk about it, that's actually outside your body. I always thought this was really funny. It's definitely inside your skin, but because there's an opening at the top and the bottom. And so when you take anatomy, you can like learn all things in more detail and stuff, but it's really the big picture, right? That digestion really does start in your mouth. You learn that in anatomy, like in a lot of detail, but you have an enzyme in your mouth, amylase, that's in the saliva. It's actually a very, very small amount of digestion that's happening there. The real purpose of that enzyme in your mouth is it trickles down with the saliva and it's telling your pancreas. So your pancreas is over on this side and it's behind your stomach and stuff. And it's telling your pancreas food's on its way, because your pancreas is more than just insulin. But we'll talk about insulin in a bit. It also releases the other digestive enzymes, what is going to be needed to break this food into the units that get absorbed, and then your cells can break them down into the 2 carbon units. So it comes down, it goes into your stomach, like we all know our stomach, and then it goes through your intestines, your small intestines, which are like 26 feet long, which is really blows my mind to imagine, like there's 26 feet of intestines like here, right? That you sit there going, it's like really like pretty amazing. And a lot's happening there. But it's this first part of your small intestines. Like when you do anatomy, you learn, right? The duodenum or duodenum, whatever teacher you have, they swear that's the way you say it. And then, right, all these parts. But I actually read or heard a talk, and I like that they showed this in purple, that it should have been referred to as a second stomach, the duodenum, because there's digestion that's happening there. So your stomach is where your proteins are getting digested. And it's also where, right, your stomach starts going, and it's doing a churning motion because it's helping, these molecules are huge, but they're kind of all packed up. And so it's helping them to come apart a little bit, not cutting the bonds, but it's opening them up. So the enzymes that are going to be the scissors can cut them apart. And the duodenum is where your carbs and your lipids are going to get cut apart into their units. But the pancreas is right there because the pancreas is going to release the enzymes into the appropriate place. And right next to it, you know, these pictures are fascinating how they draw them, is the liver. So Stephen talked about, and what you've heard me mention, and you're going to keep hearing me mention it, because your liver does everything. Depending on which of the videos you watch, you hear different things about the liver. And then the gallbladder. It's absolutely important. It's really easy to get rid of gallstones. You have to eat very healthy. You can't do any fat bombs. You can't do fat for a couple of weeks because it's fat that created these crystals in there. And there's also a massage technique you can do. But anyway, that's kind of the big picture. And then you see things like this that are like, this is happening here, this is happening there. The liver is going to be the piece where those next steps of metabolism are happening. So the pancreas is going to release stuff that these areas need, and the liver is where our other steps in metabolism, and it's going to regulate everything. All of your blood goes through your liver. And so the liver kind of has to say, hey, where are we at? Do I need to send, it's really the general saying, you need to go here, you need to go there. It's sending everything to the different places that need it. Right. And then, of course, your large intestine. So the small intestine, it's the beginning part that we have digestion, and nutrients are getting absorbed. And then the large intestine is where we want stuff coming out. So our stomach. One of the biggest things people know about the stomach is stomach acid. Everybody knows that word, even though nobody seems to know what the word acid means when I'm in chemistry class and say, what's an acid? So it means it's a low pH. The pH of our stomach is one of the lowest pHs there is on this planet, other than an extremely concentrated HCl. So it's a pH of 2, which is really low because our blood pH is like 7.4. And why would we want something that's that acidic? Because if you put your hand in there, it would burn. That would hurt. You wouldn't come to me like I was in the chemistry lab and say, oh, I poured some concentrated HCl on me. What should I do? You would immediately go to the sink, and your lab partner would be coming up to me and saying, hey, what should we do? And I'm like, run water over it. Your stomach has a really low pH because that's how you digest proteins. So if you think about it, we're giving everybody pills to neutralize that pH. We're saying, oh, you have heartburn here, we got to neutralize the pH. Well, if you're neutralizing the pH, how are you going to digest proteins? Because it won't work unless you're at a low pH. The other thing that's going on at that low pH, well, what's happening at that low pH is it's causing the proteins to denature. That's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow, one of the 6. But it's so that low pH is absolutely necessary. Now, the antacids were one thing I had when I was in graduate school. And so I was at Duke University, and they have all the medical students have to work a year in the lab. So there's always a medical student. My doctor was an MD, PhD. And so anyway, in the lab, there were a lot of MDs. And I started having this weird sensation like in here. And it was because I was eating crap all the time. I was working all the time. I was not healthy. and they all decided I had pancreatic cancer or pancreatitis, and I was going to be dead within a month. I mean, doctors are awesome. And then all the women went out in the lab, and all the women were just the techs and the secretary who's from South Carolina. And I was just like, so we're eating, and I was just like, they could tell. And she looked at me and she said, "You have heartburn." And she gave me a Tums, and it went away. And then she took me out for ice cream, and that really made it go away. And I was like, oh. Right. And then I finished up. There's, you know, the whole drama of when you're finishing school, which shouldn't be like that. It should be this loving thing. And I like looked at the Tums and I'm like, this is stupid. I'm obviously eating extremely unhealthy, and like threw it away. And the other thing going on, the other thing though, is we went, thankfully, I was a time before they had invented this, they said, rather than just neutralizing it with something that has like magnesium carbonate that we can just add to raise the pH, let's just figure out where the HCl is coming from. And so they actually give medication now, Tagamet and all those, where they actually turn off the enzyme that makes the HCl. So your body is no longer even making the acids. You don't have to take Tums anymore because there's no more issues with pH. These people are on that, and they will be on them for months and months. What's going on? How are they digesting proteins? And yet we're like, here, we'll just give you more of this and this and this. So any protein, insulin is a hormone that's a protein. If you took insulin by mouth, it's going to get digested in your stomach. So people on insulin, they have to give themselves an injection because it can't go into the stomach. Also, that low pH of your stomach is how calcium is absorbed. And so all these people who have calcium issues and are taking, and it's where vitamin B12 is absorbed. So there's a whole bunch of stuff happening at this low pH. The heartburn has to do with other issues. And so why not take a step back and say, why am I having heartburn? Which for me, it was the amount of stress that was going on to finish up my doctorate and stuff, which is almost for everybody. Like, can we slow down and take a look at what's going on? Yeah, so that's just another thing. So this is because for digestion to happen, you need enzymes. So the enzymes, what's going on in this first step is we have to break it from being this massive molecule. So proteins are these huge molecules, and they make these three-dimensional structures, and we'll see those next week. And they're gorgeous, and they'll be made up of anything from like 50, really more like 200, 500 amino acids. And they're this like big ball of yarn, right? And so you have this huge protein, and it gets to your stomach, and that low pH in the churning is to open up the ball of yarn. It's not cutting the yarn into pieces yet. But then you get these, and that's what the hydrochloric acid is doing, is the pH is what's called denaturing. And then the pepsin is released into the stomach, and it's an enzyme that cuts it into pieces. It does not cut unless the pH is low. Pepsi, the drink, was named Pepsi because the first enzyme that was ever isolated was this enzyme from the stomach. I can't remember what animal they isolated from, and they called it pepsin. And so then Pepsi came out right after that, and they actually used to add this enzyme, which of course this is like over 100 years ago. So it wasn't like purified by bacteria in the lab. It was like isolated from the stomach of a pig. And they're putting it in there, and they said it will help your digestion. Well, the problem is it's going to get digested by your stomach, and so it's not going to do what they were saying. But that's how Pepsi got its name. Coca-Cola, you guys all know how it got its name, right? Because it had cocaine in it originally. Oh, just Google it. That's where it got its name. So it had cocaine, and so it gave you quite the lift. It does not have cocaine anymore. It has other really good stuff for you instead. And then it goes into the beginning of your small intestine, which again is really your second stomach. And that's where these enzymes are released that are going to digest more protein and your carbohydrates and your fats, your lipids. And then there's more, it gets digested even more in the rest of your small intestines. And so those are just the enzymes that are happening there. And that's just another picture. So if you eat carbs, if you eat protein, if you eat highly processed oils, not talking about all the bad things that can happen from eating highly processed carbs, proteins, and fats, that it will, or these will then change, right? But these are just the enzymes that will break them into the sugar, the amino acid, and the fatty acid, which we're still in the digestive tract and now has to get absorbed into your bloodstream and goes past the liver, and the liver sends it out, but it's going to feed all your different cells. And if there's just too much at one time, it goes through your liver, and your liver just starts storing it as fat because it's having to do something. If you ever, that was the picture I wanted to get in here. I Love Lucy was this wonderful show it used to be on. There was a point where the two women got a job at a chocolate factory, and so they had to put the chocolate, like wrap the chocolate, and they were like doing really good, and then they speed up the assembly line, and they're just like trying to do stuff, and they're just like shoving it in their mouth, shoving it all over. It's like a classic scene. And so that's kind of what the liver's doing when you're eating food that your body's going, what the heck is all of this, right? And then some people will take enzymes, digestive enzymes. You can find them in all the stores and stuff. So my friend who has had pancreas issues, his pancreas is actually doing much better. It's his liver that's still having lots of delicate issues. But he's having to take enzymes right now, which you take them when you eat. And so the question is it really making it past your stomach to the duodenum to do its stuff? But it's a little bit of help. And all these enzymes are being released by the pancreas. Right. The duodenum also, and I think it's from your pancreas also, baking soda, sodium bicarbonate actually gets released to neutralize the acid. So you have sphincters at the top and bottom of your stomach, but some of the acid is going to get into the duodenum. So there's actually, this is one of the highest pHs in your body because it's neutralizing the acid. And I'm not, like you guys have heard me say, I'm not a fan of supplements at all, but if you have something going on, a disease, and you need help to get over it, absolutely. There was another talk I was listening to this weekend, and it had to do with saw palmetto, which was given almost to every man once they reach 60, because it's really good for prostate health. And so it's an herbal. But about 6 or 7 years ago, they did a study on 24 different brands of it. And it was like either 15 or 19 of the brands had absolutely no saw palmetto in them. And then several, almost all of them had so many different fillers, like so many, like they'll have like the active ingredients, and then you'll see a list like this long on supplements and stuff, and fillers, like the sawdust. If you watch that one video, which is like, really? I totally believe the sawdust is still in Rice Krispies, probably the healthiest part. Anyway, if we're going to talk about digestion, I should also mention, you may know the happy neurotransmitter. I've heard of it. I could wear my earrings today. That's serotonin. And so serotonin is when people have depression, they can put you on medications for it. But when your serotonin levels are normal, you feel joy. When your serotonin levels are low, you're either going to be depressed or angry. You can pick which one is your choice. So I am pretty sure the Hulk, I can't remember the guy's name, but when he had that gamma ray accident, it pretty much knocks out his serotonin. So a study, so this was a student did talk on serotonin. And so this was a study she found was they put Miranda and I on, we don't know each other. And there's a screen between us, we can't see each other, and we're hooked up to electrodes. And we're playing a video game against each other. And every time you win, you get to zap the other person on a scale of 1 to 5. And so she wins, and she just gives me like a 1, because we're good people. And I went and I just give her a little zap. And so it's just kind of fun and funny. And unbeknownst to her, they come around on my side and they give me a drink that completely blocks my serotonin. And so I win and I give her a 4. And she's like, whoa, what just happened? And then she's still giving me 1s and I'm giving her 5 because I basically become like the Hulk. I have no serotonin. I have no compassion. I have no happiness. There's no joy in my life. I am just grumpier than grumpy, because grumpy must have joy. He's with the dwarfs. How could you not? And so the thing that happens, she starts giving me 3s and 4s because she's like, well, have that. And unbeknownst to her, they then come and give me something that blocks that first one and gives me extra serotonin relief. And I'm just feeling joy and gladness and love. So I'm back down to 1s and 2s, but now she's at 4s and 5s because our brain can create this whole pathway that can make us like the Hulk or make us where we think nothing. I was there that day Saturday. I had like a beautiful day Saturday, but I woke up and I was in one of those moods and you just can't get out of it. And then Sunday I had an experience. So we can take medications. We have so many different medications for this. Or you can figure out where to find joy. And I'm pretty much convinced that the Tibetan monks must have some of the highest serotonin levels on the planet. Having gotten to work with some, I taught English to 3 Tibetan monks 25 years ago. One of them never spoke English, but we communicated, and they just were always joyful, always laughing, always fed me. It was the most important thing was they had to be the host, and they all they had was their trunk that they lived with. But anyway, scientists from Montreal, they found that meditation has a direct impact. That was the other thing I wanted to remind you. When you're using a computer other than your own, and I recommend you use a USB. You may lose some things. This projector is not lined up right, and then on other computers. So just go with it and stuff. Basically, people who meditate have higher levels of serotonin. And so this is because I'm a chemist, so you're going to see the weakness. But you've probably heard of tryptophan, which is an amino acid. So there's some people who take tryptophan to help alleviate their mood. So it's considered a more natural way. Tryptophan actually got banned because if it's an amino acid or a protein, you can make it in bacteria, and the bacteria is making something else, and 5 people died. This is like 20, 30 years ago. But you can get 5-HT, which is the next step. And then this gets changed into serotonin. And then serotonin, by the way, gets changed into melatonin. And anyway, 90% of the receptors for serotonin are not here. They are in your abdomen, in your stomach, in your small intestine. I think it's your small intestine, actually, sorry. So your small intestine has 90% of the receptors for joy and happiness. Makes you think. So when you get those butterflies in your stomach, that's what they're talking about. So does what you eat affect your mood? Oh, we all know it does, right? And so when you're eating healthy, you feel happier. When you're happy, you eat healthy. And that's the part my teachers who are from China, they were blown away when they came here, because they're like, I don't understand. When you people feel sad, you go and eat terrible. Because we do. We feel bad and we'll go and buy a whole thing of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and sit and eat the whole thing. And then we feel even worse. Or instead, you should go and bake something really healthy and stuff. But so in your gut. And one of the other things that most people don't know that serotonin also does is it regulates the movement of your small intestine. When you are constipated, you feel crappy because you're filled with crap, but you're kind of depressed and moody, you're angry, like you're just like, leave me alone, I just want to be alone. And so what most people don't know is the laxatives that a lot of people will take, the medications to move the small intestines, they're actually serotonin, they're antidepressants that they give for other purposes. And it's also a good time to talk about the microbiome. So the microbiome, when it's written like that, is talking about the genome, the DNA of the bacteria. And 99% of your genes in your body are in these guys. So 99% of your genome is actually part of the microbiome. Only 51 to 53% of your cells are bacterial. So then it's called the microbiota. So it ends with a TA, and that's talking about the bacteria cells itself. And so that sometimes it's really nicer to say microbiome. And so they've become kind of interchangeable, but that's why the numbers are different. But when they say they're 99%, their DNA, for those of you who know a little bit about DNA, their DNA only codes for proteins that they need to digest, because they're simple one cells, and that's all they're doing is digesting. Our DNA, 98% of our DNA does not code for proteins. Our DNA is totally different from every other species on this planet. Most of our DNA, unfortunately, scientists call junk, and they use the word junk because they don't know what it does. But our DNA is huge. It's not like the DNA of bacteria, which is really simple, but yet all of their DNA is making proteins, and so we call it their genome. So when they talk about they've sequenced our genome, it's only the parts that make proteins. The other part is where the interesting part happens. And for that, we have to actually study physics, not biology. Because biology has become completely consumed with the genomic part. But anyway, there's tons of stuff out there. If your gut health, that over half the cells in your body are bacteria, and the bacteria, if you feed them and they want real food, it's really simple. You just have to eat real food, and eating live food. That's the other thing, actually. It has to be food that was alive, meaning fruits and vegetables should really be like 70% of your diet. And grains, I don't have a problem with grains, but we eat way too many grains, and our grains have been processed. So I don't agree with this slide. I would make this part much bigger and the grains smaller. The animal product, that's a personal choice. When you see, though, most of the things that talk about that are talking about your microbiome, it is that you're eating things that are whole foods. So you need the fiber. And again, fiber, that is just fiber that's been isolated like sawdust. So Metamucil, or the fiber they're adding to the fiber 1 bars, it does not feed your microbiome because it's been removed. So there has to be that vibrational attachment. And so it's fruit, it's fresh fruit. They absolutely crave fresh fruit and legumes. We'll get to legumes next week, finally. So all the beans and stuff, and vegetables. The third thing she said was eating high water food. So food that's naturally high in water. So again, fruits and vegetables. And that's where grains have an issue. And so like if you're having grains, for every scoop of grain, you should have 2 scoops of the vegetables. And she was actually saying you should only have grains once a day, which is probably what I do. I don't do sandwiches and stuff. And so when I became gluten intolerant, we get to that with the protein talk, it may have been a blessing in some ways. So again, the enzymes break down the foods we digest. It goes through our digestive tract, the big food we ate. And I love all these because it's all the highly processed oils. And it's stepwise again. So you're now educated and recognized. And so were you able to give up some oil in your life? And then what will be the next step? And it is finding, like Miranda was, because she was in a different place, or Stephen, because they've already been on a pathway of, wow, you really can't, like Elena, certain cultures, it's just like the oil is all over the household. But it's steps of, well, let's not get this oil, we'll only use olive oil. I don't agree with olive oil, but it is a step. It is much better than the safflower, the corn oil, and all those things. And it would have to be extra virgin olive oil, so it's the first pressing and stuff. But a lot of olive oil is not olive oil that's sold in our stores. So you can tell if it's monounsaturated, if you put it in the fridge, it should solidify overnight. And if you put your olive oil in the fridge and it stays liquid, polyunsaturated won't. You have to freeze them. Anyways, we have the single glucose, amino acids, fatty acids. Now they have to somehow get into the cell. And there's these elegant ways that they get into the cells. And then the cells are going to have to change them somehow. So there are actually 4 hormones that regulate your glucose levels. So you eat food, there's glucose in your blood always has some glucose in it because your cells are needing food all the time. So your liver is maintaining that your blood glucose is always, let's say, around 90 to 100. When you eat, it's going to go up. It should go up really slowly for a while, and then it comes back down. Now, if you're always eating, then it's always going to be going that your liver is always saying there's more coming in. And what your liver is going to do is it's going to keep storing because it's always going to be storing everything. But I had a class, we were into the gingerbread men, so they are all over these slides. So insulin is the big hormone that everybody's heard of, that it's the key. The lock is its receptor. And it says to the cell, every cell in your body, food's here. And so insulin never enters the cell. It just opens the door. It says, hello, take the glucose in. And there's like 200 processes that happen once the glucose goes in. And all the extra glucose, though, because your cells are only going to take in so much, the liver has to deal with. And the liver takes it in and stores it as fat. And so insulin just said, food's here. So if you're always eating, like where they have us eating every 2 hours, 20 hours a day, then this process keeps going and you just keep storing and storing and storing. And we're not meant to do that. And I'll talk about more in a couple of weeks, is the, it's called intermittent fasting. And it's just really funny to me that we have a term for it. And it's become a fad, and it's getting butchered because when things become fads, but it's basically we're supposed to eat how our bodies were designed, which is we have to give it a chance to rest. Our digestive, everybody has digestive issues. Everyone, all young people, everybody in their 20s has digestive issues. And that's because you're eating crap and you're eating all day and all night. You have to give it a chance to rest. It's like you, when you don't sleep, you eventually get to a point where you sleep for 12, you guys are all young, so you can sleep for 18 hours, and you're just like, wow, Joey stayed up, did an all-nighter for some reason, so he's had that long. But you're doing the same for your digestive tract. And so, initially you start with 12-12, that 12 hours a day you don't eat. So you don't eat until 8 in the morning, and you won't eat until 8 after night, and then you can move it up. The ideal number is really debated. Most people can do a 16-8 without much trouble, meaning you're only eating 8 hours a day. So if you like to eat breakfast at 8 a.m., then you don't eat after 4 p.m. But you don't be obsessed about it. Like I have a friend and it's like, she has her mom trained. I have to have dinner on the table by exactly when she gets home, because if she doesn't eat right then, she'll be off the clock. And I'm like going, whoa, don't make your mom have to have dinner ready at 4 o'clock, like on the nail. And so your mom's not having the joy of getting to sit down with you and eat a meal. Like shift when you're eating your breakfast a little bit so your mom can have joy in her life too. But there's a lot of studies that show it's actually a smaller window than that. It's actually probably a 5-hour window. I think I mentioned that, which is really hard for me. My son does it most of the time. And it's hard for me, it's harder, I think, for females because our stomachs are smaller. And so it's hard for me to get enough food in. It's something like you've talked about, you getting enough calories in and enough when you were on that one, the carnivorous diet. And so, yeah, we all have different places and stuff we are. And when you're not perfect and you eat outside of your 8-hour window, it's not to get upset at yourself, because we're going to see in a minute that's a bigger problem. Anyway, insulin's what tells us to store. It tells your cells, here's glucose, you're going to store it away for when there is no glucose. And so you're storing. And then its counterpart, also released by the pancreas, is glucagon. It is not released when you eat. It's released several hours after you eat, when you're in that fasting time. And it's saying, hey, my blood sugar is dropping below 80. We need to start releasing the reserves. And so this is when you start breaking down food. Or I just exercised. I just went for a long run or something. And anyway, so the two of them work in combination. And the one is going, basically, insulin's telling your body to store. It's synthesizing, it's storing stuff. And lysis means we're going to start breaking down things. And so you absolutely need them in balance. So the other two hormones that are related to insulin are your fight and flight. So adrenaline, which is also known as epinephrine. So they were just named by two different people, but they're the same molecule. So if you have a real stress, or you're just sitting in stress, your adrenals, which are right above your kidneys, are going to always be releasing epinephrine. And epinephrine goes and tells your body, I need sugar. I need sugar released now. And you're releasing the sugar, your blood sugar is going to go up high. So people who are always stressed are going to have high blood sugar. There's actually a syndrome where some people, first thing in the morning, their blood sugar, all of us, our blood sugar goes up a little bit in the morning because you're getting up. It's just something your body anticipates. It's why you want to have kind of a regular schedule so your body knows. But there's some people where that anticipation, cortisol always goes up first thing in the morning. That's when most heart attacks happen because of that. It goes up too much. And that's because they haven't had the balance. So I talked about cortisol last week, but it is, whenever epinephrine is released, like everybody's heard of the fight or flight, and people who are the adrenaline junkies and stuff, cortisol is also released. And one of the things that's very different about these molecules is the size. All these corners are carbons. And up there, you see a lot of OHs, which is like water. So that one gets around your body, no problem. This one takes the slow boat from your adrenals to your liver. And cortisol actually binds your DNA, goes into the cell and goes to the DNA. Epinephrine, adrenaline doesn't need to do that. But that perpetual stress we're on is going to always be releasing cortisol. So again, epinephrine tells glycogen, your liver store glycogen, your muscles store glycogen. So glucose is stored as this. Epinephrine says release that. Anyway, so the stress response, which we need our heart to get up. We need glycogen to break down to glucose. But if we're always there, the epinephrine actually turns off your stomach, turns off the digestive tract, other than the liver to release glucose. It turns off your immune system. And yeah. So if you're always in that, then the partner, it's called the sympathetic. I don't know why they called it that. That would be interesting to know. Anyway, so autonomic means it's automatic, which is also fascinating because it gives you the perception there's nothing you can do about it, but there is. Change your mindset. But anyway, there's two parts to this. So when you're stressed, you're not digesting. Your digestive tract is turned off. And then the counterpart is the one when you're at rest, which is when your digestive tract will work. So stress also increases the pH of the stomach. So the HCl is not being released into it. And so I already mentioned that the pH of the stomach needs to be closer to 2 for proper digestion. The number of people I know, so this is one of those gates around the stomach, has an opening on both ends because it's so acidic. And that one or the other doesn't open right or opens too much. And how many people, and so I think, let's make this their anatomy better, is the pyloric gate's the one going into your duodenum from maybe turned out well enough. You knew it for that test or that homework set. And so it's almost everybody having, like, they're always sick, they're always nauseous, the food's always coming up, which is the other gate, because everything's getting stuck in there. And so you feel anger, you have acid reflux because the one gate's not releasing stuff into your small intestine. B12 is not being absorbed, calcium also. And so interestingly, you get acid reflux, proteins aren't being broken down, and your microbes change, and you're feeling bloated all the time because things are not working, and things aren't moving around. And we all want to look like those gingerbread men. We just want to be happy and jolly. And it is all with the microbiome. So this is trying to say the microbiome, that we want to feed them. And this is actually this TED Talk down here, which is one I kept looking for, and I found it last night after I posted the thing. But for your, yeah, it was in this talk, it was a guy who I think he was actually a psychologist, and it was this woman, she had 3 small children, and she started having every digestive issue possible, and she was like, she ran and she did everything, and he realized it had to do that she never sat down to eat. She was always so busy. And they were actually able to help her lose weight, to become healthy, get rid of all her digestive issues by these 3 simple things, which was before she ate, when she sat down to eat, to just take like 3 deep breaths. Just slow down your breathing. And I think the key that's not there is to sit down or to take that time. So you're not like doing stuff and eating like everybody does that, or in your car. Everyone's sitting there eating in their car and on their cell phone. And it's not breathing here. That's, most people are always breathing up here. If you're actually filling your lungs, then your diaphragm will move and your belly moves. That's how opera singers, you have to have your belly. If you're doing Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga, you're always talking about the lower dantian, and that's, no idea what that's. All right, the second thing was chewing your food. That most people don't chew enough. And so in the good old days, parents would tell you to chew 32 times. That was probably one of the greatest blessings. My mom never told us to do that. But when you chew it, many things are happening. It helps to release more saliva. The saliva mostly is there to help lubricate so the stuff can make it to your stomach and small intestines. But you're supposed to actually chew your food until it's fully liquid, which most people don't. I don't. This is like the worst thing. When I went on my silent retreat, this is one of my favorite things. And I have to like really mentally be there. And so this is what your 7 days is this week. Instead of that, you're eating a specific food or not eating something, and you're not doing a healthy recipe this week, you're going to rest and digest. And so it gives you 4 choices. The other thing is, it is almost the end of April. So at the end of the week, your healthy change is due, or by next Monday, if you should be at 30 days. If you started late, just then you can wait. But your next one, you can do a different healthy change. And I'll talk about other ones next Monday. Or you can choose, if you do one of the ones this week and you're like, you know what, I need to keep that up for a month because I really need to not be eating in the car, eating on the go. I need to sit down and really eat my food. So when I was on a silent retreat, it was the first day, they talk about this, the most important part, because you're not talking. It's like the greatest blessing. You just get to sit. Nobody can tell you how your eating is wrong, but they wanted you to sit and you just have your one bowl of food and spend a half hour eating the food. And I actually did it the one day because you have nothing to do. I took a half hour. It's probably more like 20 minutes to eat a banana, just one banana. You take a bite and you just chew it. And it was gorgeous. It was like an old growth. I am sure it's an old growth where this place is. And it just was just like, you just sit there and stare at the trees, and eventually you're like, oh, I'll just take another bite. And it was just so amazing. And then you come back and you're like, that's it's going to be. And then everybody's got all their stuff. But anyway, slowing down, actually sitting down. One of them says, if you can, take one meal a day in silence. I mean, obviously, if you're sitting with your family, I've done it where I've eaten with other people in silence, and it's a little funky. And saying grace, whatever that means, of saying thank you. And so depending on what your beliefs are, some people are going to be okay to do a full blessing, but saying gratitude to Mother Earth, or just saying gratitude to the farmers who grew your food. Somebody was out there. Every time I'm on my bike and I pass the guys out in the field, I'm always waving. They all now wave to me when they see me coming, because I'm in all pink. And I wave to them and send them, like when I pass the garbage man today, I always send him a gratitude, because I'm so grateful we have garbage pickup. But anyway, taking the time. There's different ones. You can also do like a gratitude journal. The giggling ones there, or you can choose to meditate. I think that was, slide was there. Anyway, and so that was the third thing they told her was, so taking that moment, take a deep breath to chew your food, and if you forget to say it at the beginning, to say it at the end. When I was my mom, we grew up. And so this is the question, is which came first, the healthy mindset or the healthy microbiome? But does it really matter which one came first? It's that they always come hand in hand. And so it doesn't really matter which came first. You have to have both. We talked about this last time, right? If you're constantly in stress, your body's going to start breaking down protein. So it starts breaking down your big muscles and making it into glucose. And you don't actually need the glucose because you weren't running from anything. You weren't fighting. And so it then stores it. All that glucose gets broken down to 2 carbons and stored as fat. And that also, cortisol is saying, hey, we're running, so we don't need an immune system. We don't need digestive system because we don't have time to eat. And people are constantly feeling. And so all these things that like getting upset about stuff, staying up late and staring at a screen. If you're going to stay up late, get a good book and sit and read. But sunshine, which the sun was amazing, and I'm glad none of you have red faces. Made my friend, I went to see him yesterday, he's out, and I'm like, you need to go inside now, because you're like as pale as can be, and you're going to be sunburnt, and then you'll be really miserable tomorrow. Exercising and having fun when you exercise, laughing. So laughing burns calories, and it's one of the choices for a week. You get a giggle, and making sure you get enough sleep. Sleep with joy. So the one is a gratitude journal, and it is when you wake up in the morning. I think that's the next slide. And continue to eat healthy, which you should want to do. Saying the blessing. I talked about this the last class, that humans are the only ones that can turn this response on with just our thoughts. Every other species has to have some kind of something happen. And so always choosing love, always choosing joy, taking that deep breath, because if we're turning it on so fast, then that must mean with our thoughts. And so why walk around? I was with a friend yesterday, and he's like, oh my gosh, my dad's calling. And his dad's not his favorite person in the world, not mine either. And he just started going on, oh, he's going to go on about this and this and this. And I said, you're making a story. You're making this whole thing. So let's create a, like, what if? It's like, well, he's not going to do that. And I said, yeah, but what if you change the game on him and say, yeah, you're right, Dad. How was your day? Did you do this? And like, just like change it and see, because he's not going to change. We know that. We all know people who are stuck. Again, so we're going to try for this week. So we get class presentations and papers. Your papers, your presentations are like that 7-minute window that we talked about. But then your paper will have, it was the question Merrill asked me, more details, the 2 studies that, like Amber said, she goes into more detail in the paper. The papers are due by, I think, Saturday. presentations though we're going to do. And the other thing I wanted to ask you all, I won't be recording, but if something happens, because a couple of people have been sick, and so if you are sick, we don't want to share the germs. So you'll have to come on Zoom because it's mandatory. If you can be here like 10 minutes early, because otherwise it's 5 minutes for each person to get their thing on the computer. So I will be here. And so if you have a USB, that's by far the easiest. But if you use Google Docs, especially being here 10 minutes early, because we can put it on this computer, we can download it. So then when it's your turn, you can just click on it. And so having a USB, we can try hooking your computer up, which worked with Amber's. And then when we hooked mine up, mine no longer works. So it might just be my computer. I'm gonna have to get rid of my thing. Anyway, so it's a good week because you have class presentations. You're probably in the midst of midterms. It's the 5th week. And so it's a good time to slow down. And so again, adrenaline or epinephrine is the one that suppresses digestion, and then its counterpart is what helps slow us back down. And so we want to stay in that. Or this is something one of Joe Dispenza's friends talks about. And so if we're always in fear and feeling lack of control and judge, you're going to constantly be letting out epinephrine. Or you can be over here where you just take that moment and just feel gratitude for a random person and say, you know, or if you see somebody and you're like, wow, they're in, when people, I'm on my bike and people are, I actually just feel compassion for them because I'm like, that person's in a really bad place. Because I'm just here on my bike. I have every right to be here. And they're upset because they're not on their bike, I guess. So there's different ways. I mean, there's the toot of, hello, you're doing great, or the kids waving and stuff. And so stay in a place where you're releasing endorphins and all the things that are making you feel, and you'll have a lower, huskier voice apparently too. Stay in that. All right. Yeah, feeling safe. And all right. So as long as you choose love, I teach a kids class, or I will be again. And a reminder, our food has vibes as well as our thoughts. Our thoughts are vibrations, and they are what comes before the actions. The material world that we're obsessed with is only a small fraction. It's all actually the vibrations that are going around. And so they're really what the message is. And so the food you're eating has vibes as well as how you're eating it, how you prepare it. You want to make sure when you prepare food for others, when you prepare your presentation, you're doing it going, these things are awesome. And we're in a very safe environment here, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning, everybody's half asleep. But when you prepare food for others, you want to be in a joyful place. So those go into your foods. So this is a picture of protein. This now got me off in the order we do stuff. So proteins, for those of you who've learned about proteins definitely fold by vibrations. And so the vibes that you're sending them, and they're actually starting to come out with the quantum studies that show this. DNA is a quantum molecule, and so proteins and our DNA. And so the vibes that you're sending it can either be constructive or destructive. And so whether you're doing Tai Chi or Qigong, which is one of the first things I do in the morning. So Qi, Prana, if you're talking the yogic sciences, the vital force or life force is what they often interpret those two. Prana, they try to say it's breath, but it's beyond that. And we don't really have a word in English. And then I've pondered this for several decades now. I think actually the word might be love. And so if you're able to stay in a place of feeling love, that unconditional, compassionate love, it is very different. And, or you can be sending the wrong signal where you have the lack of ease or dis-ease. And that wrong signal can be trauma. And so it could be trauma from like you get into an accident, or you get sick, or it could be traumatic by eating a grilled cheese sandwich like that. Or our food, which again, that's toxic, or all the different additives and toxins in our food. And oh geez, I can't remember the third one. I apologize. And just being playful, having fun. There was somebody, Joey and I were crossing the country. That was in North Dakota. They were, that was the other thing I was going to say is have some fun with your slideshow, like showing a personal picture, like he was showing his actual liver. It was cutting up. If you're a person doing dishes, doing it with joy and fun. Doing the dishes is one of the greatest chores you get to do because you get some downtime. All you're doing is doing the dishes. You don't have to worry about anything else. You can just chill out. You can sing your favorite song. Joey is the guy who does the dishes in my house. We don't use a dishwasher, and I go through a lot of dishes. I make a mess. And so it's become a thing, and he gets to make a tower with the dishes for them to dry. And every once in a while, I pull the wrong dish off first, and then anyway, that's one of my favorite pictures of the kids. Or if you're with a group, of taking that moment, and we've forgotten how to do it. That's a water molecule. So this is Dr. Moto from Japan. If you've never heard of these studies, there's a whole book of these crystals. And so you can take water and freeze it and makes crystals. And if you actually would say a word or sing a song, you would get different types of crystals. So whenever they use words like love, joy, they would get these beautiful crystals. And if they used words like fear or hate, the crystals would not form. And this is the other thing is, like, you really shouldn't be this person. You don't want to be this person. And you all know that you've been this person. Hopefully you aren't this person. But first thing you do in the morning is you got to look at your phone. I just look at the clock. I mean, it's you just have to break the habit. You really, it's going to be there. It's going to be there in 10 minutes. Or when you go to bed, like I talked about, it actually does interfere with melatonin. And so instead of grabbing your phone and seeing, did anybody post anything on Facebook, it's waking up, placing your hand on your heart. You don't have to get out of bed yet. And just being grateful. Some people will listen to a morning affirmations, but really, and so it was like 5-8 years ago, and it was when my yoga teachers had said to keep a gratitude journal, which kind of is in thing now. And so I did. You only have to keep it for a short time because then you eventually can just do it without having to write it down. And you do find often you're writing the same thing every day, but it is, if you choose to do that one, it's every morning and every evening. So in the morning, 3 things. I did 5 every day that you're grateful for that day. And so I do start my day with that. And so it can be that I'm grateful I get to have an 8 a.m. class. And my students are getting up early to come to the 8 a.m. class. And then also when you go to sleep. And this was something that always cracked me up in yoga because they have all these different positions and all these different reasons. Just let your body be how it is. Place your hands however your hands placed. And just taking those 2 deep breaths. And right, get a pet if you don't have a pet. And learning to do, this is interesting. I have a slide, but not on the show. They actually took a group of people from China and a group of people from the US, and they suffered from depression. And the study actually blew me away when I read about it. And they told them for the next 3 months, do whatever makes you happy. And after 3 months, the people from China were all fine. And the people in the US were still depressed. Probably they were put on medication. I don't know. And so they're like, well, how can this be? What's different? And had to do probably with the cultural interpretation of doing what makes you feel better. And so the Americans did self-help. And they went shopping and bought the things that are going to make them feel good. And basically, it was all about them. As it said, makes you healthy. And in China, what they did is they all went out and served. So they went and helped other people. And so that, anyway, put that out there because it is something that happens when you, and it's part of why I decided to take this class, because I was like, well, gosh, 8 a.m. is a lot, but it is when you're doing something for other people that it's not just about you. And so if you view your presentation as that, instead of it's about you and you're up here presenting and everybody's staring at you, that you're sharing some information that you want to tell people how awesome like liver is, that it's not this scary looking, it does have a weird texture. I mean, he kept saying it has a very weird texture. Oh, there it is. I just put it in the wrong place. This was another study that was done, and these are just people and who have not been trained. And this was looking at the serotonin levels. And so they taught them how to do TN, is transcendental meditation. So a type of meditation. The people who had already been trained. This is the thing that is impressive, is the starting levels are already double. And then they sat for their half hour of meditation and their levels went up really quite a bit. And these people did not. And it doesn't mean you have to take a meditation class and learn how to meditate, because every teacher is going to be very opinionated that you have to sit this way. But it's one of the choices you do for a week. Amber can probably tell you her, because in their class, they didn't have a choice. They all had to meditate for a week. And it's very different. Each person, I mean, true meditation is that you're sitting, because your spine does have to be straight, because that's part of it. But it could be that you're going for a walk. I think you did something different each day. I have a list of different things. So when you go for the walk, your cell phone is not with you and no people are with you. Your dog can be with you. And you are walking, the dog is walking you. The dog wants to stop, you stop. You're not in a hurry, you're not running. You're just out there to smell the flowers. To look at the tulips. The tulips were amazing this weekend because the sun came out and all the tulips just opened up and it was just like, wow. Or just sitting. Like some people can do the thing where they stare at the candle. I'm always amazed. People tell me, yeah, I stared at a candle. And I'm like, wow, I have tried that for years and I cannot do the candle one. But I do sit every morning. I get up really early and I do my first several hours actually are in quiet, different types of meditation. So some people can sit, some people don't sit as well initially. You could be listening. You get a pick, you can do the gratitude one. So there are so many now on whatever you listen to, YouTube, that are guided meditations. You have to find one that works for you. So put in, like I had a student and she started meditating for her 30-day challenge. Her daughter and her were having issues. Her daughter was in high school and she said, well, my daughter doesn't like these meditations. And I said, because she's 16 or 18 and you're 40 something. Of course not. I said, have her Google meditations for teenage girls. And she's like, oh my gosh, it's like, and her daughter's still meditating. She sent me an email, and daughter's still meditating, and she journals after she meditates. And then she comes and talks to her mom, and she's like, it totally changed our relationship. And the thing that was crazy is this gal also told me how much trouble she had. She said, 10 minutes, don't set a timer. I mean, you're all going to set a timer, but don't set a timer. That's like the worst thing you can do. You just sit. You can count your breaths. I don't know. You'll figure it. The first 3 days are awful. Some people have to sit in a closet. I thought that was funny. There's several people who sit in closets. I mean, joyful fun, but and then something usually happens about 3 days that something clicks and you're just able to just sit. It could be sitting outside. It could be reading. If you read the Bible, it could be reading verses from the Bible and then just sitting in that quietude after reading. And so anyway, she said she by the end of the year said one time she just sat, she was home by herself and she sat, so it ended up being an hour. So I have a clock on, wasn't listening to, but guided meditations can help people initially because you're just listening to the person's voice. You can do it laying down, that's perfectly fine. You can fall asleep because there's a different type of sleep. I like morning because I'm more alert and I fall asleep really fast in the evening, like before my head hits the pillow. Anyway, so that's your 7 days. Look at the sheets. You'll know which one you want to do for your 7 days. There's no healthy recipe this week. So instead, your notes are 10 points today and 10 points on Wednesday, because Wednesday, it is you being that perfect audience I'm gonna have a thing you're gonna, for your classmates, and writing down. So if you forgot at the beginning of your notes for the liver and pineapple talk, something that you really liked about their talk, like bulleted lists or the picture of his liver, that personalizing, that they were knowledgeable, right? That they loved their topic, eye contact, something that you might want them to do better. And sometimes there's nothing, but there's always something little, and that will help you become a better presenter. And then a question or something you learned from their talk, like something specific. So these need to be specific, not they did good, because you're not going to get 10 points if you just say they did good. You'll get half points because you were here, and I'm grateful for that. But any questions for me? I'm going to stop.